So go to the next one here. This is from Three Dog the Korvacs on Instagram, who going to shout him out. He's got some cool artwork on his page, and he sent a few things through DM and some cool stuff. He's on IG, Three Dog, the number, Three Dog dot Korvacs. Some cool stuff. Check him out. His question is, what do you think nu metal gave as far as impact, both from musician standpoint and marketing? I like where this is going. Do you see nu metal as good or bad overall in the grand scheme of metal? All right, let's unpack the first question.
Yeah, those are two different questions, but similar, and I like them both.
Yeah, me too.
So impact from musicianship and standpoint in marketing.
It's tough. I think as we've talked about numerous times on back episodes of this podcast, the money that was kicking around in the music industry around when nu metal was popping off, so there was a lot of marketing behind some of these bands, right?
Like you'd never seen before. Like I mean, granted we were young, but like a lot.
And whether they were good or not, there was marketing
All right,
behind
you're
these
going
bands.
where I'm going. Okay.
Yeah. Now, there were some great bands that came from this, too, obviously. And I think those bands we might have seen either way, but we got to see everything because there was a lot of money, and they were just, everybody was trying to find another Limp Bizkit, another Linkin Park, another band of that ilk. And there aren't too many of those kicking around because those guys were on a different level as far as musicianship went. So we got both, and we probably found a few bands that we liked along the way that we may never have found because of it. So that for me is awesome. I think that's the way this worked, was that we had all that money and all that marketing in the ecosystem per se, and we got a little bit extra that maybe we wouldn't have seen had it been 2008.
Yeah, no, I think from a marketing perspective, like there were a lot of people that were duped because of the marketing. Like there were a lot of bands that were jammed down people's throats or were thrown on tours that kind of sucked. And like Tone said, there was some good stuff in that era, but the branding machine was out in full force. Like Limp Bizkit was a lifestyle. Fred Durst, Backwards Hat, lifestyle. Like you had that with Run DMC and Adidas and things. It wasn't Run DMC, Adidas.
Yep.
Like that. Those are synonymous. The Backwards Hat, the red hat, like that was. I mean, the machine was churning heavy in that era. So I can appreciate that. From a musician standpoint, there's some standouts, but I think overall, I don't know, to play that kind of music, I'm not a musician. I wouldn't think you'd need a ton of chops, but there's definitely standouts, and it brought like a DJ element. A lot of nu metal bands had DJs, so there was kind of this hip hop infusion. I think out of those, the marketing was the most like whatever labels, whatever you did, it worked. Great question, Nate. What you got?
Yeah, great question and great points, both of you. I was thinking, like, as I think about nu metal, and pre-show we were talking about the stock exchange, which is kind of funny. Sometimes you buy a stock and 10 years down the line, you're like, that was an obvious stock, like Amazon, like that was an obvious stock, right? So nu metal, I think, like, is a culmination of everything that was leading up to nu metal. It's like, well, yeah, actually nu metal makes sense that it happened because rap was big at one point, rock was big at one point, I mean, it's like rock, metal, goth, like it all kind of got thrown together in one genre. Whether it really is conducive to one genre is a different story, but there was money behind the scenes, and it kind of it was almost like a shotgun blast, like, hey, this is everything in one, take it or leave it. We're going to put together a family values store, and it's Limp Bizkit, it's Korn, it's Ice Cube. It's like, what? But all those genres are nu metal when you think about it, right? So it makes sense, and it's a cash grab. And there is a lot of good music that came out of that. And there's also a lot of crap. And there's also a lot of good stuff that came out that people never got really the time of day on, because there's some hidden gems in the nu metal scene that, should have been bigger. And so that's always the case, I feel like. So, what do you think nu metal gave us as far as impact from both musicianship standpoint? I feel like it really is an organic combination of what was happening in the 90s. And we were like the right age. And we're like literally the perfect people to market to. It's like the Abercrombie and Fitch. Like, these are people that have their parents' money to blow on this stuff. So let's pump it through TRL, and everyone's going to buy it. And we were victims of that, for better or for worse. The good stuff's great and the bad stuff's terrible, but there's a lot of stuff in between that is also good. And speaking of marketing, we had Frank Maddox on here, right? Some of the best artwork that I can totally just be like, man, if I were to hire someone for my project, I would want his style. And I don't know, I don't want to pigeonhole him into a nu metal style, but his style kind of defined what nu metal is. It's very graffiti-esque. It's spray paint, everything kind of thrown together. It's a lifestyle, like you said, Tuan. And I think for all the good things and bad things we got out of new metal, I think the good things outshine the bad for sure.
Do we want to answer the second part of that question?
Yeah. Do you see new metal as good or bad overall in the grand scheme of metal? I would say neutral because it happened. You know what I mean? It was a starting point. It was a starting point for a lot of people, including probably us as far as metal. I mean, we talked about an early episode, like watching Beavis and Butthead and getting into, some heavier bands through that. But like we were of the perfect age where that was the most accessible metal. So I can thank, I'm trying to think of bands, a lot of gateway bands for me through new metal. So I'm neutral. For me, I'm neutral.
I would say it was important for me because I think, like you said, it was a jumping off point into some heavier music that maybe I wouldn't have given the time of day had I not cut my teeth with, Mudvayne,
Right.
something like that.
Yep.
So, it had an effect for, I think, us. I think people of our age group, the people who kind of came of age and grew up through the late 90s, early 2000s with this popping off. It made it so that you were comfortable wearing that black t-shirt and maybe listening to something that you wouldn't have given the time of day to if you were 10 years prior. So that I think it was a big deal.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, it's hard to consider it metal. There's metal aspects to it. And additionally, when you think about it, we're 99 into 2000. It was always 70s, 80s, 90s, classic rock. When you get into the 2000s, it always gets a little confusing because 2000s is 2000s. Well, now we're at 2020. So what are we calling it? The 20s,
21. Yeah.
Yeah. So I almost feel like new metal was just, they needed to slap something on it. And it has a pretty huge umbrella in terms of what falls under new metal. So I would say, yeah, it's important mainly because there's so much that falls under that umbrella that's pretty widespread. I mean, you think if Deftones are getting thrown under new metal, which, they independently say that they're not really new metal, which I agree with. But if it does on a grand scheme of things, then yeah, new metal is great because we got Deftones, we got a lot of great music, System of a Down, Korn, and even the stuff that's okay is still pretty good in the grand scheme of things. So I would say that the new metal scene was something I appreciate.
Yeah, and don't let anyone bullshit you. Like a lot of the big metal bands now, their influences are those bands. Like
Yeah.
I mean,
It's come full circle, right?
Yeah.
It was huge in the late 90s, early 2000s. 10 years ago, everybody was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Why did anybody like any of that music?
Yep.
While we continued to ride for Limp Bizkit. And now everybody's like, oh, you know what? It wasn't that bad. We kind of liked a lot of that stuff. And yeah, I might throw on Head P's Broke today because I want to listen to that stuff again. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
Everything goes in cycles. But yeah, great question. Thank you for throwing that out there. We love stuff like that. That's a cool question for us.
Tone, it kind of dates us. Just to riff off what you said, it kind of dates us because it's just a matter of like 6 months from now when we go to an Urban Outfitters and there's a Head PE Broke fucking ripped up T-shirt that's supposed to look like a Motley Crue T-shirt.
It's almost vintage, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is. We're old.